The ice didn't make a sound until it swallowed her whole, and not a single soul saw her vanish. Except for the dog, who ran straight into the freezing lake like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. The morning had been calm in Aspen Falls, the kind of winter day that made everything feel soft and slow. The lake, half frozen and dusted with snow, looked like glass stretched across a silent world. People were out walking their dogs, sipping coffee, chatting quietly as their breath curled into the cold air. Children threw snowballs by the park benches, bundled in thick coats and red scarves. Nothing about the scene said danger. Nothing warned anyone to look twice. Then it happened. A bark, sharp, urgent. It didn't sound like play. Dakota, the large German shepherd known around town for his quiet, watchful nature, suddenly took off like a shot. He broke away from the path, from the woman who often walked him, and bolted toward the lake. She screamed his name, but he didn't stop. His paws pounded over the snowy bank, claws digging into the ice, each step faster than the last. People turned, heads swiveled. No one understood. Until the ice cracked. Dakota leapt, not caring about the danger, not even pausing. The surface gave way beneath his weight, and with a splash that seemed to echo across the entire town, he vanished beneath the water. Gasps filled the air. The woman who walked him dropped her coffee, hands over her mouth. Someone shouted for help. Another man ran for the shoreline, slipping on the frozen path. But no one could see what Dakota had seen. No one saw the small hand disappear beneath the ice, or the pink mitten that floated for just a moment before being pulled under. Seconds passed, maybe a minute, long enough to feel like forever. The lake was quiet again, except for the frantic voices at its edge. Then, movement. Dakota broke the surface with a burst of energy, his body soaked, his breath ragged. In his teeth, he held the sleeve of a small jacket. Behind him, clinging to him with the last of her strength, or perhaps not even conscious anymore, was a child. She was limp, her face pale, her eyes closed. Her hat had come off, and her blonde hair clung to her skin in icy strands. Dakota swam hard, muscles shaking from the cold. The girl's arm drifted lifeless in the water as he dragged her slowly, painfully, toward the bank. He didn't whine, he didn't bark. He just kept going. By the time two men reached the edge and pulled them out, Dakota collapsed onto the snow. He was shaking violently, his fur frozen stiff in places, his breath shallow. But even as the paramedics rushed in, even as the woman who walked him fell to her knees sobbing, Dakota refused to move away from the girl. His eyes never left her face. One paramedic, young and wide-eyed, whispered, "I think she's still breathing." Another pressed 2 fingers to her neck and nodded, "Just barely. She's alive. Just barely." No one knew her name. No one had seen her fall in, but Dakota had, and without waiting, without asking, without hesitating, he had jumped. The girl would live, and the town of Aspen Falls would never forget the sound of that splash. The hospital was quiet except for the steady beep of machines and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes on tile. In room 204, the little girl lay motionless, beneath a warm blanket, her skin pale, her lips still tinged with blue. Wires and tubes connected her to monitors that watched every beat of her heart, every breath she struggled to take. A nurse gently wiped dried lake water from her cheek, whispering things she knew the girl couldn't hear but said anyway, just in case. No one knew who she was. There was no ID, no backpack, no school tag. Her jacket had a torn label. Her boots were a size too small. A search through missing persons turned up nothing. No recent reports matched her face. She had come out of the water like a ghost, like the lake had tried to keep her secret. But there was one clue, or maybe not a clue at all, maybe something else entirely. The dog. Dakota lay curled up on the floor beside her hospital bed, soaked fur now half dried, though patches still clung together in frozen clumps. A nurse had tried to move him once, gently, coaxing him with food and soft words. He didn't growl, he didn't bite, but he wouldn't leave. He simply lowered his head onto the tile and stared at the girl like he was keeping watch, like it was his job. One of the doctors, an older man with kind eyes, looked down at the dog and said, "You're not going anywhere, are you?" Dakota blinked once, slow and steady. That was answer enough. Hospital staff let him stay after that. Outside the room, Detective Marla Reyes stood with a clipboard in her hand and a tired look on her face. "No hits in the database," she said. "No one's reported a child matching her description. It's like she dropped out of the sky." Eli Walker stood across from her, arms crossed. His clothes still smelled faintly of smoke from the firewood in his cabin. He didn't talk much. He just kept looking at the window into the room, at the dog who refused to move, at the girl who looked too small for the world she had just come out of. "I heard the dog's yours," Marla said. Eli nodded slowly. "Sort of. He's not chipped." "No. Found him about a year ago. On the edge of town. Took me 3 weeks to get him to trust me enough to come inside. Never spoke a word. Not even a bark. Just followed me home. And stayed." "Where'd he come from?" Eli shrugged. "Wish I knew. He's got scars. Old ones. Like he's seen things." Reyes flipped to another page. "Well, he saw something today. Something no one else did." Eli didn't respond. He was still watching Dakota through the glass. Inside, the girl stirred. Just a twitch. Her fingers moved slightly. Dakota's ears perked up. His head lifted. Eyes locked on her face. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just watched, as if waiting for her to wake, as if he had brought her this far and wasn't letting go now. No one knew her name, but Dakota did. And that was enough, for now. Eli Walker hadn't set foot inside a hospital in over 6 years. The bright lights, the sterile smell, the quiet beeping of machines, it all scraped at memories he didn't want to remember. But when the call came, he didn't hesitate. He'd known it would happen one day. He just didn't expect it like this. He arrived at the emergency room in worn jeans and a thick flannel, snow still clinging to his boots. The nurse at the front desk didn't recognize him, and why would she? Most people in Aspen Falls only knew the name Eli Walker from old headlines, "Firefighter Rescues 2, Loses Brother in Blaze," and from the stories that followed. He'd left the force. He left everything. Moved into the woods and didn't come back. Until now. The nurse guided him down the hallway without much small talk. "The dog's in the room. He hasn't left her side since they pulled her out of the lake. We thought maybe you'd want to see." Eli didn't answer. His throat was too tight. When they reached the room, she opened the door gently. He stepped in. Dakota was lying at the foot of the hospital bed, his body still and silent. But when he heard the footsteps, his ears flicked, and his eyes opened. He lifted his head just slightly, recognized Eli, and then turned his gaze back to the girl, like he was saying, "You're here now, but don't expect me to leave." Eli walked to the edge of the bed, his boots quiet on the tile. The girl was pale, still unconscious, her small hands resting above the blanket like doll arms. She had bandages on her neck and a faint bruise near her temple. Her hair, blonde, tangled, damp, framed her face in soft waves. Eli's breath caught. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he whispered, "She looks just like her." Dakota's ears twitched again, but he didn't move. He stayed beside the girl, watching her chest rise and fall. Eli reached out, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. His hand trembled as he pulled it back. "No," he murmured. "It can't be. It's not her. But she looks so much like Rosie." The nurse looked up. "Who's Rosie?" Eli didn't answer right away. His eyes were distant, fixed on the girl, but not really seeing her anymore. "My niece. She drowned. 5 years ago, we never found her body, just her coat, pink, same color as this kid's." The room went quiet. The nurse said softly, "This girl's not Rosie. We checked. No match." "I know," he said. "But still." Dakota let out a soft breath, laid his head back down on the floor, and closed his eyes. Eli knelt beside him, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "What did you see out there?" he asked. "Why her? Why now?" There were no answers. Not yet. But something had cracked open inside Eli Walker. Something he had sealed shut for years. Grief stirred in his chest, mixed with something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Detective Marla Reyes wasn't easily rattled, but something about this case sat wrong in her gut. The dog, the frozen lake, the girl with no name, it all felt too clean, too sharp around the edges, like a picture that had been carefully arranged to hide what mattered most. And Eli Walker, with his quiet voice and hollow eyes, hadn't helped. She didn't like mysteries, especially not ones involving children. So she drove out to his cabin the next morning, determined to find answers. The road curved into thick woods, narrowing until it was barely more than a dirt path. Snow muffled the world. Trees stood like silent guards on both sides. It felt like driving into a secret. When she finally reached the clearing, the cabin came into view, small, old, sturdy. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from the chimney. A battered pickup sat half-covered in frost. No lights. No welcome sign. Just the wind in the trees and the crunch of her boots on frozen ground. Eli answered the door before she knocked. "I figured you'd come," he said. "I figured you'd be the type to wait with the door unlocked," she replied. He stepped aside without a word. Inside, the air was warm, thick with the smell of firewood and old pine. The space was simple. A wood stove glowed in the corner. A kettle hissed gently. There were no electronics, no television, no computer. Just shelves lined with books, a table stacked with firewood, and a couch covered in a faded blanket. But what caught her attention were the walls. Dozens of photographs tacked up with thumbtacks and yellowed tape, all of them of the same girl. Blonde hair, wide eyes, sometimes smiling, sometimes not. Marla took a slow step toward them. "Chloe," Eli said behind her. "My niece. She went missing?" He nodded. 2 years ago. She was 8, disappeared from her schoolyard. No witnesses, no signs, nothing but her backpack in the woods. Marla pointed to one photo near the center. "That one. She looks older here. That was taken a few weeks before she vanished. My sister sent it." Chloe was growing fast. Marla's eyes narrowed slightly. "She looks like the girl from the lake." Eli didn't answer. "But the girl at the hospital has different fingerprints, different blood type. She's not Chloe." "No, she's not." His voice was tight. "But when I saw her lying there in that bed, I swear, for a second, it felt like I was looking at her again." Marla studied him. "You think they're connected?" "I think Dakota thinks they are." She looked at the dog's bed near the fire. Empty now. Still warm. "You're saying the dog led you to her because of Chloe?" "I don't know what I'm saying. I just know Dakota was never a normal dog. He showed up right after Chloe vanished. Silent, scarred, and angry." Marla stepped closer to one photo. This one showing Chloe in front of a red barn. Something about it pulled at her memory. "Where was this taken?" she asked. "Old farmland. Burned down years ago. Why?" Marla didn't answer. She was already writing something down in her notebook. Her instincts, sharpened by years of chasing ghosts, whispered that the past wasn't buried. Not yet. The snow was falling again, soft and steady, dusting the trees like powdered sugar. The hospital had allowed Dakota to stay, curled up beside the girl's bed, silent and still, like a statue made of fur and breath. But something had changed in him overnight. He no longer lay peacefully. He paced. His ears twitched. His eyes flicked to the door every time it opened, like he was listening for something no one else could hear. By the second morning, Dakota began pawing at the door. A nurse called Eli, saying the dog wouldn't settle. He arrived within minutes, hair uncombed, boots barely laced. When he walked into the room, Dakota stood and stared at him hard. Then he trotted to the door, looked back once, and let out a low, rumbling bark. It was the first sound he'd made since the lake. Eli grabbed the leash, though he barely needed it. Dakota pulled, not wildly, but with purpose. They exited the hospital into the frozen air, heading across town toward the woods like something was calling him. Eli followed in silence. He knew that walk. He had done it before, years ago, when Chloe disappeared. Search parties, drones, dogs, and nothing. But this felt different. Dakota wasn't looking. He was leading. They reached the edge of the lake, where the trees grew thicker, taller, leaning in like they were trying to hear a secret. Dakota paused once to sniff the ground, then veered left toward a stretch of land that hadn't been walked in weeks. The snow was undisturbed, untouched, but the dog moved like he knew the way. After 20 minutes, they reached a patch of trees where the lake met a small bluff. Hidden behind a cluster of pines, a collapsed structure sat like a broken rib cage. An old ice fishing shack, half rotted, half sunken into the snow. Eli stopped. His breath caught in his throat. He remembered this place. So did Dakota. The dog didn't wait. He darted forward, nosing at the warped boards, pawing at the frozen slats. Something beneath the debris made him whine. Eli knelt and began pulling back the wood. It cracked in his hands. The air was bitter, biting into his skin, but he didn't stop. And then he saw it. A shoe. Small. Purple. The sole worn smooth from playgrounds and sidewalks. Eli's heart dropped. He picked it up slowly, like it might crumble in his hands. It was the same brand Chloe wore when she disappeared. The same cartoon character on the side. He turned it over. There, near the heel, a faint letter C in black marker. His knees buckled, and he sat hard in the snow. Dakota sat beside him, tail still, watching. Eli stared at the shoe, his voice barely a whisper. She was here. Dakota pressed his head against Eli's shoulder. No bark, no growl, just the weight of a dog who had known all along. In the distance, the lake groaned beneath the ice, and the forest, once silent, suddenly didn't feel so empty anymore. The ice cracked open like a wound. The forensics team had arrived just before dawn, bundled in thick coats and carrying equipment that steamed in the cold. They moved slowly across the frozen lake, guided by Eli, who showed them the collapsed fishing shack and the patch of disturbed snow where Dakota had found the shoe. Dakota stood nearby, still and alert, his eyes fixed on the ice like it might speak if he watched long enough. They brought in drills and sonar, quietly mapping the lake bed beneath. The team leader, a woman named Dr. Lang, had her doubts at first. But after 30 minutes of silent work, the expression on her face changed. She called Eli over and pointed to the screen. Something's down there. Large shapes. Multiple. They broke the ice carefully, melting it around the edges to preserve whatever lay beneath. The water was dark and heavy, a mirror to the sky. Then, the first bone surfaced. Small, white, fragile. Not from an animal. Lang's voice was tight. It's a human child. The silence that followed was different this time. Not shocked, just heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. More bones followed, 3 sets, then a 4th. They worked through the morning, uncovering remains that had been hidden for years, remains that no one had been looking for, because no one even knew they were gone. Except Dakota. Eli stood at the shore, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He watched the forensics team carefully gather what they could, each bone placed into small evidence bags, each child's life reduced to fragments of what once was. He couldn't speak. He couldn't even move. Marla Reyes arrived midday, her eyes going wide at the scene. "I got your message," she said, breath puffing in the cold. "I didn't think—" "You weren't supposed to," Eli replied. Reyes walked slowly toward the lake's edge, scanning the dig site. "We have no missing reports for this many kids. No one said anything. No parents. No alerts. Because maybe no one missed them," Eli said bitterly. "Or maybe someone made sure they couldn't speak up." Dakota sat beside him, ears forward, body tense. He looked like he wanted to run, like he needed to keep going. Reyes crouched in front of him. "You weren't just saving one girl," she murmured. "You were following a trail." Dakota blinked slowly. His nose twitched toward the trees. Reyes turned to Eli. "The girl at the hospital. She's not just lucky. She's the only one who got out." Eli said nothing. His hand dropped to Dakota's head, resting there lightly. The snow began to fall again, soft flakes that danced on the air, covering the broken ice, the emptied shack, the footprints in the snow. And somewhere deep in the woods, where no one yet dared to look, other secrets waited. But not for long. Because Dakota was still watching, still listening. And he wasn't done. The machines beeped steady and slow, measuring each fragile breath. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater in the corner and the occasional shuffle of nurses passing in the hall. The girl hadn't moved in days. Her tiny body was still under the warm blankets, her hair clean now but still tangled at the ends. A stuffed bear sat at her side. One of the nurses had brought it, hoping to bring her comfort. But the girl didn't stir. Dakota had stayed near her bed the whole time, curled tightly on the floor, eyes half open, always watching. He never barked, never whined, just waited. Like he knew she wasn't gone, only trying to find her way back. It happened quietly, without warning. The girl's eyelids fluttered once, then again. Her small fingers twitched. Her breathing changed. The nurse at the desk caught it first and called for the doctor. Eli, who had been sleeping upright in the waiting room chair, snapped awake and hurried down the hall. By the time he reached the door, the nurse was gently adjusting the girl's pillow and whispering her name. No one knew what it was, but they had to call her something. The tag on her bed still said, Jane Doe. Her lips parted, dry. Her voice didn't come out. She blinked once, slow, and then her eyes drifted to the floor. Dakota. His ears perked up, and in the next second, he stood and placed his front paws gently on the edge of the bed. The nurse moved to stop him, but Eli raised a hand. Wait! The girl looked at the dog. Her eyes widened just slightly. Her bottom lip trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. Recognition. Dakota climbed the rest of the way onto the bed. Slowly, carefully, like he understood she was breakable. He lay beside her, his head near her shoulder, his breath calm and steady. She moved then, just her hand, reaching forward to touch the fur along his neck. Her fingers were shaking, but she touched him like she already knew him, like he was hers. Her voice was a whisper, ragged, barely there. He followed me, she said. The nurse stepped back, eyes wide. I waited, the girl went on, pressing her face against Dakota's thick coat, and he came. Tears welled in the nurse's eyes. Eli felt his throat tighten. He had heard children speak in fear before, in panic, in confusion. But this wasn't that. This was quiet, sure. Like a prayer answered. What's your name, sweetheart? The nurse asked gently. The girl didn't answer right away. She held on to Dakota, her small arms wrapped around him like she was afraid he'd disappear again. Then, softly, almost too quiet to hear, she said, Lily. Eli closed his eyes. A name. At last. Lily. And the dog who had pulled her from the frozen lake, who had crossed miles of snow and memory to bring her home, finally rested his head beside her and closed his eyes. He had found her, and she had been waiting. The sun had returned to Aspen Falls, but it brought no warmth. Only light that made the snow glare and the silence feel louder. Inside the hospital, room 204 had changed. Lily no longer slept all day. She sat up now, ate toast and fruit from a small tray, and sometimes reached for the stuffed bear the nurse had left her. But she still didn't talk much, not unless Dakota was beside her. When he left for even a moment, her hands gripped the blanket, like she was afraid it might vanish too. The doctor said she was healing slowly, that her body was stronger than they expected. But her mind was something else, something they couldn't measure with wires and machines. She hadn't said anything else about what happened, not since she whispered about the dog. No names, no place, no people. But she drew. It started with a single crayon, then a handful. Nurse Mallory brought in a coloring book, but Lily ignored it. Instead, she flipped to the blank back pages and began drawing on her own. Not stick figures or flowers or houses. Her drawings were quiet and strange and exact. She drew trees, hundreds of them, tall, dark trunks with no leaves. Then came the red barn. It appeared again and again in different angles, sometimes from far away, sometimes up close, with a single window blacked out. A cage followed. Bars. Shadows. A bed rolled up in the corner. And a man. Always the same. Round shoulders. Big hands. Eyes hidden by a cap. A thick jacket. Lily never colored his face. Rhea stood beside Eli outside the hospital room, flipping through the stack of drawings, her brow furrowed. "I don't know what to make of this," she said. "Kids draw weird things sometimes. Could be something she saw in a movie." Eli didn't answer. He had gone pale. She noticed. "What?" He pointed to the red barn on the second page, the way its roof sloped left, the missing panel near the bottom, the crooked weather vane still drawn at the top. "I know that barn," he said. "It's real." Reyes looked again. "Where?" 10 miles north of here, on the edge of Greenwood Hollow. It belonged to a guy named Tom Keller." She flipped through more pages. "Name doesn't ring a bell." Eli's voice dropped. "He used to work search and rescue. About 5 years back. Trained dogs. Did tracking missions. Was a good guy? Or seemed like one. We worked a few calls together." "What happened?" "He quit after an accident. Said he was burned out. Last I heard, the barn caught fire a few years ago. Thought he'd moved out of state." Reyes looked through the window at Lily, who was drawing again, head bent low, tongue pressed to her lip in quiet focus. She didn't look up. Eli said quietly, "If she remembers him, and he was there, that means he's not gone. And that means she's not the only one who knew." Dakota lifted his head from the foot of the bed, ears turning toward them like he was listening too. Reyes straightened. "Then we better start digging." The barn was little more than bones now. Half-collapsed beams, blackened wood, and silence that clung to everything like smoke that had never quite blown away. The fire had taken the roof, half the walls, and all the light. Snow had fallen since then, covering what was left in a soft, white sheet. From the road, it looked forgotten, abandoned. But Dakota didn't believe in forgotten things. He moved ahead of them, nose close to the ground, tail stiff with focus. The leash tugged gently in Eli's hand, not urgent but steady, as if the dog knew exactly where he was going. Reyes followed close behind, her boots crunching over snow and ash. She didn't speak. Neither did Eli. There was nothing left to say. They reached the edge of the old barn. Dakota paused, sniffed, then stepped forward over the warped threshold. The scent of old smoke still lingered, mixed with something sour and stale. Eli felt his stomach turn. Inside, the snow wasn't clean. It had melted and refrozen, crusting into gray ice that clung to the wreckage. Dakota moved to a corner, nosed at a pile of broken boards, then sat down hard, his eyes fixed on the floor. Eli knelt beside him and pulled away the wood piece by piece. Reyes joined him, helping quietly. Beneath the top layer, the ground changed. The ash was darker. The snow was wet and mixed with something that wasn't just dirt. It smelled wrong. Chains. Metal. Half buried. Rusted from time and cold. A thick cuff. A bolt. A length of heavy chain that had been nailed into the foundation. Reyes sucked in a breath. That's not farming equipment. They kept digging. Beneath the ash, they found pieces of toys. Cracked plastic. A doll missing an arm. A small rubber ball melted on one side. Bits of cloth. A child's sock. Rhea's voice tightened. "This place was used. After the fire." Eli didn't answer. He felt numb. His hands moved without thinking, pulling more wood aside, clawing through the packed dirt like he could dig the truth out with his bare fingers. Then Dakota growled, low and sharp. Eli turned. Half hidden beneath a beam, caught between 2 layers of earth, something shone. He reached for it and pulled it free. A badge. Blackened around the edges, but the number still showed. Faded but clear. Reyes knelt to get a better look. "This can't be." Eli stared at it, frozen in place. "Your captain," she whispered. "He died in that house fire 6 years ago." "That's what they said," Eli muttered, his voice distant. "Closed casket. No autopsy. No ID. Just assumption." Reyes shook her head slowly. What if he didn't die? What if he disappeared because he had something to hide? Dakota gave a sharp bark and began pacing again, nose low to the ground, circling the perimeter. Eli stared at the badge in his hand. He remembered the man who once stood beside him in smoke and fire, the one who taught him how to read signs, how to lead, how to trust his gut. And now, it all felt twisted. "Dakota brought us here for a reason," Reyes said. Eli nodded, gripping the badge tighter. Whatever this place had been, it wasn't buried anymore, and neither was the truth. The wind howled through the trees outside the sheriff's office, rattling the windows like impatient fingers tapping to be let in. Inside, the light was harsh, too bright against the cold truth they were now facing. Reyes stood over a computer monitor, arms crossed, face pale. Eli stood beside her, hands clenched into fists, jaw locked tight. On the screen was a still frame pulled from surveillance footage, a man stepping into a gas station 2 counties over, hood pulled low, face partially turned, but not enough to hide what mattered. "That's him," Eli said quietly. "That's Captain Morris." Reyes didn't speak. She just nodded. The program had done the rest. Facial recognition, voice comparison from old dispatch tapes, and now, with a rush order from the lab, the final piece, DNA. The blood found beneath the barn, on a small scrap of burned cloth, matched the captain. Not from a corpse. No body had ever been recovered. And now, they knew why. He had never died in the fire. He had faked it, slipped through the cracks, and vanished into a world he thought no one would find. Until now. Reyes turned from the screen and stared at the badge Eli had found under the barn floor. He used his rank to move through towns without question. He ran youth programs, volunteered with rescue teams, trained dogs. He built trust, so no one looked closer. Eli looked down at Dakota, who lay curled at his feet. The dog's eyes were open, alert, watching. "He was Dakota's handler," Eli said. "Back when we all worked together. He trained him. Then Dakota disappeared the same week the fire happened. We all thought he ran off, scared." Reyes shook her head. "He didn't run." "No," Eli said softly. "He was tracking him. From the start." Dakota lifted his head then, as if he understood. His ears twitched, his tail didn't wag. He didn't need praise. What he needed was to finish what he started. Across town, Lily sat in her hospital bed, drawing again. But now, her pictures had changed. She no longer drew the red barn. She drew a road, a truck, a man standing beside it. His face still missing. No eyes, no mouth, just a dark shape wearing a cap. She used black crayon for his coat every time. And next to him, she always drew a dog. Not a regular one. Big, strong, ears pointed. She always gave him golden eyes. "Dakota." Reyes walked into Lily's room quietly, a folder tucked under her arm. She didn't open it. She just looked at the child and asked, "Is he the one who hurt you?" Lily nodded slowly. No words, just that tiny movement. Eli leaned in. "Do you remember where he took you?" Lily pointed to the latest picture. The road led into the trees, into hills that stretched beyond the town, past where most people ever went. Reyes turned to Dakota. "You know where it is, don't you?" The dog stood. No bark, no sound, but his eyes said everything. He wasn't lost. He never had been. He was hunting. Snow fell thick and heavy as the convoy crawled up the old mountain road, tires crunching over frozen gravel, headlights cutting through the mist. The ranger station hadn't been used in over a decade, hidden deep in the hills where the trees grew too close together and the wind never stopped moving. It was perfect for someone who didn't want to be found. But he had been, tracked by footprints, confirmed by a wildlife camera, and led to, most of all, by a dog who had never stopped chasing him. Dakota sat in the back of the lead SUV, his eyes fixed on the trees ahead, body stiff with focus. He hadn't barked, he hadn't moved, but Eli knew. Something inside the dog had shifted. This wasn't fear, this was something else, something deeper. At the base of the hill, the team spread out, radios crackling low, rifles held tight, breath clouding in the air. Detective Reyes gave quiet instructions. pointing to the ridgeline, the station windows, the narrow service trail that wrapped behind the building. They would move in fast, silent, clean. But Dakota had other plans. One moment, he was still. The next, the back door was open. Eli barely had time to shout before the dog was gone. A streak of fur and muscle cutting through the snow. Reyes called out to hold fire. The team froze. They watched as the dog barreled up the hill, straight toward the front of the station. "No," Eli breathed. "He's going in." Dakota slammed into the old door with his shoulder. Wood cracked. Hinges groaned. And then he was inside. Gunshots rang out. Just one. Then silence. Every breath seemed to stop. Reyes gave the signal. "Move." Agents poured in from every direction, kicking open doors, shouting commands, covering every inch of the old building. Eli ran behind them, heart thundering in his ears. His eyes searched the snow, the porch, the shattered door. And then Dakota appeared. His fur was soaked with blood near his leg. His chest heaved. He limped badly, but he was walking, head still high, golden eyes still sharp. Behind him, dragging in handcuffs, bruised and snarling, was Captain Morris. They stared at him like they couldn't believe it. The man who trained their dogs, who helped families search for loved ones, who wore medals and gave speeches, he looked smaller now, hunched, wild-eyed, dirt on his face and fury in his voice. "You have no idea what you're doing," he spat. "You think this ends with me?" Reyes stepped forward, her voice cold. "No, but it starts with you." Dakota stopped at Eli's side and collapsed into the snow. Eli dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, tears freezing on his cheeks. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought him home." The agents led Morris away, his curses lost in the wind. And there, beneath the snow and trees and sky that had watched everything in silence, a dog who had once been lost, who had once been broken, lay with his mission complete. He had gone in alone and come out with justice. The seasons passed slowly in Aspen Falls, like the town itself was catching its breath. Snow gave way to spring, then to the golden quiet of summer, and then fall returned with crisp air and the scent of wood smoke. But for Lily, everything had changed long before the leaves began to fall again. After the trial, after the headlines faded and the reporters moved on, Lily was placed with a kind couple who lived just outside of town. No one expected her to smile right away. No one rushed her to speak. They simply made space. Space for healing, for quiet days, for soft music and warm meals. She didn't talk much at first, but she began to hum. Then she laughed one day when the neighbor's cat fell into the bird bath. Then she started telling bedtime stories to Dakota, who never left her side. He slept at the foot of her bed every night, his big body curled like a protector carved from stone. If she stirred, he was awake. If she cried, he rested his chin on her blankets and waited until the sobs passed. The nightmares faded slowly, but never fully returned. Because she knew, every night when she closed her eyes, that he would be there when she opened them again. People in town remembered what Dakota had done. They remembered the girl in the hospital, the man in handcuffs, the dog that charged into gunfire. His name was spoken with respect. Not loud, not boastful, just real. A year after the lake, the town gathered near its edge. The air was cold again, the sky pale gray with thick clouds. Snowflakes fell gently, swirling in the wind, softening the earth. Near the bank where it had all started, a new statue stood tall. It was bronze, detailed with care, life-sized, full of motion. It showed a dog mid-leap, muscles stretched, eyes focused, a child's scarf clenched gently in his mouth. People stood around it quietly, their boots crunching in the snow, their breath fogging in the air. The mayor spoke for a minute, a few words about courage and instinct and love that didn't need to be taught. But no speech could match the truth of it. At the front of the crowd stood Lily. She wore a green coat and held a cup of hot chocolate between her mittened hands. Dakota stood beside her, older now, moving slower, his muzzle touched with gray. but still proud, still alert, still hers. She stepped forward and read the plaque aloud in a voice that had grown stronger in the years since it all began. He didn't wait for a signal, he didn't wait for backup. He just jumped and pulled out a miracle. The wind carried her words across the ice, across the trees, across the town that would never forget. That night, back at home, Lily curled up in bed with her bear tucked under one arm and Dakota lying beside her. As sleep began to take her, she reached out one hand and rested it gently on his back. "Good boy," she whispered. And in the quiet, Dakota sighed. Not in pain, not in fear, just in peace. Because he had done what he came to do, and the miracle still slept safely beside him. Thanks for watching this incredible journey. If you were moved by Dakota's story, leave a like, subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable moments that deserve to be shared.